You know those PCR tests that you have to take constantly at work, at school, or when you travel as long as you aren't vaccinated, or these days, even if you are? Well, Karen Kingston is back with us today. She says that those tests are being used to collect genome data without our consent, and that may be just the beginning.
Well, it's to collect the genetic data. And I mean, I'd like to direct people to an article on the Mayo Clinic from May of last year, where they basically admit to this. They talk about, hey, we're going to be launching PCR tests in this country. You probably never heard about it before, but it's a common test used in microbiology. They talk about that it's a polymerase chain reaction. PCR
However
test.
you say that.
I can't say that. Anyway, all that is copying and pasting DNA codons. That's basically what it is. And PCR, you can copy, paste. So they look for patterns in your genetic makeup of these different codons that make you what you are as a human being, the diseases you have, your, everything, your hair color, et cetera, et cetera. You can also do it with other species like viruses and hydras, if you will. But it goes on to say, this is the part that's very alarming, is they say, why are we collecting DNA for testing COVID-19 when SARS-CoV-2 is RNA? It's single helix. So why would you use a double helix test? It was used in HIV because it was a double helix virus. Doesn't make any sense to use it for the SARS-CoV-1 or 2 because that's single helix. And they go on to say is that the structure of DNA can tell you what organism is being looked at. In the case of humans, PCR can identify a person using his or her genetic signature. In the case of COVID-19, researchers have published more than 100 genomes collected from patients to identify the key features of the virus that caused this disease, SARS-CoV-2. Now, this was back in May. If you click on the link in the Mayo Clinic, it'll take you to the NIH website. It looks like they've completed over 1.3 million Americans' genomes, and it's available in a public database, not just to America, but to China, Japan, and all the world. This is a complete violation of the Constitution and our Fifth Amendment. Not only can the government not take our, they can't take our property without due process of law.
Right.
They just took our beingness, the code that God gave us, and it's available to countries around the globe. So you might be asking part of like, why would they be doing this? And here's another alarming thing I want to point out is that they say normally it would take years to develop a PCR test for COVID-19. But just like everything else in COVID-19, they were able to do it in just a few months instead of it taking.
The masks, they were all ready to go. Every single response that has been laid out here was all ready to go. I'll tell you why, because this was planned. This was planned years ago. Anyways, go ahead.
It was. And the NIH played a major role in this as well. So the database was going to the NIH website. The NIH also has a new technology in genetic sequencing, not just for viruses, but for sequencing out entire organs or beings. And it's called Ares, A-R-E-S. And it's pronounced Ares as in the god of war. And the god of war turns man's hearts bitter so that he divides and hates one another and wages war on himself. And literally it's called Ares. That's what the NIH calls it. And what Ares is trained to do is you can just give it a couple mRNA molecules and it can then structure out an entire virus. Or it can also make predictions about which RNA molecules would be most compatible with what organisms. And it also can actually, in deep learning, promise to solve many other problems in structural biology. So it can actually build out an entire organ with just a little bit of information. So this information they're collecting, I think it's reasonable to assume they're collecting the genome from Americans, feeding it into Ares, and then Ares is figuring out how to then rebuild a person or rebuild a super person. What's also interesting is the NIH has been sponsoring research for Hydra for more than 2 decades. And as Dr. Carrie Madej was saying the other day, Hydra is regenerative, right? It can rebuild itself. And on the NIH website, they show an image of it where if you split it in half, it'll just build 2 new hydras and then keep building more and more hydras. But what's interesting is that UC Davis put out an article in 2010, and what they stated in this article, and this is really alarming, because we're also going to go into the studies where they're doing transgenic studies using Hydra. But they said in 2010, Hydra has the same number of genes as humans, about the same number of genes, sharing many similar genes. They also found genes linked with Huntington's disease and with the plaque formation seen in Alzheimer's disease. So Hydra contains the genetic sequences that induce Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is one of the most debilitating neurological diseases you'll see. And if you take a look at videos of people who are suffering from Huntington disease, it looks much like those victims who were injected with the vaccine and now have lost control of their neurological system.
The unexplained tremors and all of these things that we're seeing in all of these self-recorded, published TikTok videos and Instagram videos before they're taken down and cast away from society, threatened with physical arrest and prosecution.
Exactly. And that's a manifestation of the genetic sequences that are in the Hydra. Also keep in mind that we're going to get back to that.
So are you unequivocally saying that Hydra exist in these shots?
Transgenic Hydra does. So transgenic Hydra is like a chimeric virus. It's when you take an organism and then you artificially induce DNA from other organisms, other species into that organism. So if you take a look at the studies that were done as early as 1999, there's the generation of transgenic Hydra. I just explained what that meant. You take DNA from one organism and you incorporate it into another.
Got it.
And this is done, you can do this in different stages, but this one was done in the embryonic development phase of Hydra. And Hydras take anywhere from 2 to 24 weeks to come to full incarnation, if you will, in normal circumstances. But what this says clearly is the focus of this proposal will be generation of transgenic Hydra. So to create a Hydra that is made up of multiple species. This is going back to 1999. It says that the Hydra embryos at the blastula stage will be injected with a small fraction of DNA, resulting in hatchlings containing the viral genome, suggesting stable integration. So it's fully integrating into the genome when it's in that embryonic development. And Karen Kingston saw images that looked like that under the microscope, that looked like a blastula, an embryonic blastula. It also says that the second approach will use transposable elements with a broad host range of specificity. So hosts from amoebas to insects and potentially to humans now that they have Aries. Transposable elements is when the PCR, when the codons can copy paste and can jump amongst themselves to create mutant species, if you will, and mutant things.
All of this going on inside of your body.
Some people, it's going on inside their body. Now, keep in mind too, on the last show, we talked about there's 4 delivery devices in there. There's the nanospheres, the nanodiscs, the graphene oxide tubules, which I think are actually part of Tesla phoresis. But we know there's multiple those bubbles and discs, they have things in them. And then they have biomarkers to go to specific parts of your body. So maybe some people, they had a biomarker that had a transgenic Hydra that went to their spinal cord in their brain, which caused these Huntington diseases, right? Other people, we know they were targeting the heart. So these blood clots, and Dr. Karen Kingston, we talked about this. I talked with her on Monday about this. The blood clots, if the Hydra is delivered into your heart, and it's got the Aries artificial intelligence, and it also has integration from the human genome, because they were collecting that from us all throughout 2020 and continue to do that at many schools, in colleges and high schools. They're demanding weekly or bi-weekly tests just to go to school from these young children and adults. So anyway, so there's a biomarker with the Hydra. It's got the human codes in it, and it goes to the heart. And then through the AI, what it's doing is it's rebuilding the heart organ. It's intelligent enough to do that. I just want to be clear. There's 2 areas that have been completely unregulated by our government. One is artificial intelligence, and the other one is biotech. It's been completely unregulated. These monsters have been creating hybrid chimeric creatures using human beings and human genetic material and converging them, right, with other animals and species and insects and whatnot. This goes on in the labs. At this point, they think it would be much more fun and powerful and get off on actually what you said, doing this to us and to our children. They want to take the children and now do their hybrid insect hydra monkey experiments on injected with a parasite, and a parasite that breeds, that has multiple genetic codes in it and is developing in your body.